It's so lovely to see so many of you here this morning at 180. Thank you so much for joining us for our Shifting with the Seasons conversation, which feels very topical this morning as the weather is doing God knows what out there. Exactly. For those that I have not yet met, my name is Victoria Smart and I am from the Beauty Triangle. And I am really excited to be joined this morning by three fantastic practitioners all of whom I actually trust with my own wellness, so that's very exciting to be picking your brains. And we're going to be discussing the routes to optimise our wellness as we shift from summer into autumn, because I'm sure we can all agree that there are several changes in the way that our bodies feel and function as the weather starts to change, whether that is changes in our skin health, in our gut and our digestion, or in the way that we feel and the energy that we're feeling but also giving to others. Now, those are just a few of the things that we'll be speaking about this morning. But before we do, just some housekeeping. You should all have a programme on your seat. On there, you'll find further information about each of our speakers. And there's also a referral card. So should you wish to be connected with any of our speakers, please just fill in the information and we will connect you straight after the conversation. You also have a goodie bag on departure. Please don't leave without that. There is a very exciting supplement in there from Ancient and Brave, which has recently launched. So on Friday, there we go. So you're one of the first to have it in your hands. I think Jo will be explaining a little bit more about that in due course. And then just a few words about the Beauty Triangle for those that aren't familiar. We launched 6 years ago now to educate and empower audiences on all areas of their well-being, but importantly from a holistic point of view, which is why you will always find three practitioners on our panels, each of whom are a real expert in their chosen subject. But we also launched in order to connect you, our audiences, with some of the most authoritative voices in the world of wellness, which brings me very neatly to introduce today's speakers. We have dual qualified dermatologist, founder of Joonbyrd and aesthetic doctor, Dr. Alexis Granite. We have nutritional therapist and head of education and nutrition at Ancient and Brave. And we have cosmetic acupuncturist and the woman who I believe actually has healing hands, Sarah Bradden. Now that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to our speakers to say a very quick hello, a little bit about themselves, and then we will get going on the main conversation. Alexis.
Thank you so much. So nice to be here. So I'm Dr. Alexis. I'm a dual board-certified consultant dermatologist from the US and now in the UK. And I'm also the founder of body care brand Joonbyrd. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Jo. I am a naturopathic nutritional therapist. I'm based mainly down in Hove and with the brand Ancient and Brave. And I'm excited to be able to talk more about the brand and what we do today.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Sarah and I'm the founder of the Bradden Method. I'm an acupuncturist. I am astrology mad and an intuitive healer as well. So it's really lovely to be here with you all this morning.
Thank you so much. So Alexis, we're going to start with you and we're going to speak about the skin because I think this is something we can all relate to, especially as the seasons shift. When we're making that transition from summer to autumn, what are the changes that you see changing in the skin as well as your clients' main concerns?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I find, and there isn't a science behind this necessarily, but I do find with my patients that when we transition between seasons, it feels like many skin conditions flare. So we find that often with acne, eczema, psoriasis. Something about a seasonal transition will cause flare-ups. And it's interesting, I think probably there's a change given the climate change in the skin barrier. There can be changes with your circadian rhythm and sleep and patterns. And so I see it throughout all my patients and to be honest, across a range of skin conditions with that seasonal flare. So whether you're going from cold weather to warm weather, or in our instance, warmer weather to cold.
And what can you do about those conditions, with those concerns? What can we be doing during this time within your clinic?
Yeah, so I think it's important to be consistent with your skincare routine. Also think about, in some cases, if you tend to have oily skin, maybe when you're going from winter to summer, you'd want to lighten up. And in the case now, when you're going from warmer weather into colder weather, it would be time to use products that are a bit richer so you can start to make those shifts in terms of your routine. And then in terms of what we can do in clinic, so I mainly practice, I treat kind of a range of skin conditions, but I do mainly practice aesthetic dermatology, so all kinds of treatments from microneedling and mesotherapy all the way through to injectables and then more intense lasers. And fall is actually a good time to do a lot of those treatments. Because, for example, if we use things like skin boosters, things like Profilo or the so-called salmon sperm, which you may have all heard of, which is actually polynucleotides derived from salmon. But these are skin boosters, so things that are going to help amp up hydration, going to help support the skin barrier. Those are often good options to do as you transition into fall weather.
And when it comes to something like a laser, I think that's something that we speak about more so in autumn because our skin isn't in the sun. Is this the right time to be doing those sorts of treatments as well?
Yeah, for sure. One issue that people often will see post-summer is their pigmentation will flare, and that's just given obviously with increased UV. So one thing to note when you're thinking about pigmentation or laser for pigmentation, you want to wait until any sort of tan or extra sun exposure has faded, because oftentimes the lasers and treatments that we use to target pigment can't tell the difference between sort of pigment that you want to treat and then a background tan. So oftentimes we'll wait, let's say, until October to do more intense kind of laser treatments, but it is a good time. Fall and winter are definitely a good time of year to tackle pigmentation.
And can we speak a little bit about what you've called salmon sperm? I think there's so much noise about this at the moment. Can you explain a little bit what that is and what it's actually doing in the skin and where we should be having it?
Yes, so I think it's interesting because in aesthetics there's often trends, interestingly, and so I think what we're now seeing is filler was obviously, people were talking a lot about filler for a long time. Maybe there was a bit of overdoing it of filler, and so now there's sort of been this shift away, I think, from filler, rightly or wrongly, because filler can be used in very small amounts to have incredible results. But so I think there's been a definite trend to kind of move away from that and think about how can we stimulate collagen, add volume when we're losing volume over, with age, and do it in a way that maybe looks more natural, that sort of feels more natural, although maybe it doesn't feel so natural to inject salmon sperm. But so the idea is essentially to take substances, compounds, ingredients that can stimulate collagen and elastin, because this is ultimately what keeps your skin looking, fresher, dewier, plumper. And so we're always looking for different ways to do that. Historically, hyaluronic acid is what we've used in most skin boosters. So if you've heard of things like Profilo, there's other ones called Volite, Revive. They're sort of all competitor products made by different manufacturers. Very safe, great, safety profile, and also suitable for all skin types. So in someone who's young and maybe just wants to have an amazing boost, let's say before a big event like a wedding, or someone who's a bit older maybe and is really thinking about sort of a pro-aging approach and how are they going to sort of maintain their skin quality. So the interesting thing about salmon sperm, which I actually didn't know, is that it's been around and used for over 2 decades, but for a variety of other purposes. So to actually help with, for example, joints, lubricating joints when people have had joint pains. I have no idea how they figured out that this is helpful.
Concerning thought.
Yes. But essentially what is done is we produce polynucleotides also, as do salmon. And so what they'll do is take the polynucleotides, purify them, so there's no fish parts there, and then those are injected into the skin, into the area called the dermis, which is a sort of mid portion of the skin, which is the area where we produce collagen and elastin. And so you get sort of an immediate hit of hydration. Your skin looks just gorgeous and sort of juicy for, let's say a week after the treatment. But then long term, it is going to help the skin naturally produce its own collagen and its own elastin. And part of the reason why I love skin boosters as well is because the results compound over time. So if it's something that you're doing, let's say several times a year, over time, the quality of your skin does improve.
I love what you say there about this idea of using our own body's resources, that regenerative approach, which I think we're seeing more and more now, especially in the aesthetics industry, but also using these medical-based products that are being used for joints to now optimize the way that we look as well. You mentioned trends there, and I think that's really fascinating because this industry does go through trends, and I think that is quite concerning. How do you ensure in your clinic that you're not following a trend or the patient that you're seeing isn't following a trend? How important is the consultation part?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's where it comes down to really personalizing and customizing a treatment for each individual. And one of the things that I think is very important in aesthetics is that there isn't really this one-size-fits-all approach, and that not to sort of push people to do more treatments, but it's very oftentimes a combination of treatments is the best approach. And it might also be optimizing all the other things that they're doing. So what they're doing at home, lifestyle, exercise, diet, those are all just as important as what you're doing in the clinic room with me. But I think for example, we ran into issues with filler, I think, is that there were practitioners maybe saying you can sort of solve all your issues with filler, and we see now that just starts to go, completely awry. So where you take a combination of things, maybe a bit of laser, maybe a bit of a skin booster, or some microneedling or acupuncture, those are where you're going to start to get, I think, the best results, and also harness the skin's own ability, as you said, to produce collagen and elastin and to maintain the skin barrier to heal itself.
And can these products support when we have skin concerns as well, like acne scarring and kind of the aftermath of actually quite painful medical conditions?
Yeah, for sure. And that's something, acne scarring, I think, can be incredibly, upsetting for people, really a hit to your confidence. So this is an area where we might want to do something like laser. And so a time like the autumn is a good time to kind of invest in those types of treatments for scarring. But absolutely for, even after, I find actually skin boosters can be quite helpful for people who suffer with dermatitis and eczema because the skin is quite dry, or even sometimes after things like psoriasis or eczema, you may have post-inflammatory pigmentation. So the skin has been disrupted or inflamed, and then you're left with sort of dark marks or spots. And so there are lots of in-clinic treatments we can do to target that as well.
I think often the idea of aesthetics is actually demonized. It's not just the way that we look, but also the way that we're feeling, especially when it comes to our skin, which is the first thing that everyone sees. What about skincare? Because I feel like this is the question everyone wants to know. Where do we start? What should we be doing from home to optimize our skin health, especially during this season?
Yeah, I think, skincare is such an important part of how we care for our skin. It's where you can start, obviously, at home, and I think I think there's been a bit of drama, let's say, around skincare, just because given what goes on, I think now with such a young consumer and potentially younger, mostly girls, using products that potentially aren't suitable for their skin type. But I do think you can, when you invest in good skincare and skincare that's targeted for whatever your concerns are, you really can get incredible results without then having to do a lot of sort of in-clinic treatments, and the two really work side by side or hand in hand. So when you're shifting from summer to autumn, you may want to go with slightly richer products, so things that contain maybe more oils, or for example, moving from a cleansing foam to a cleansing balm, something that's going to be a bit richer, more hydrating. It's also a time to potentially layer in serums that target hydration, so looking for ingredients like ceramides or hyaluronic acid. And then if you do suffer with pigmentation, there's a whole host of different sort of ingredients you can use to target this. Some of my favorites include azelaic acid, kojic acid, tranexamic acid. There's a lot out there. And I think the main thing when it comes to skincare is also being consistent. So giving products at least sort of 6 to 8 weeks to see if, how they're getting on. And then, you can really start to see those results.
I hope someone's taking notes, because you've said some products there that I haven't even heard from after doing these panels for a while. I'd like to touch back on the idea of personalisation, especially when it comes to skincare, because I know that I'm guilty of going to absolutely everything that I find in the cupboard. Is there anything that we can be doing, like skin scanning or anything like that, to know what's going on beneath the skin and what's actually right for us?
Yeah, one of the, so there are obviously AI apps and stuff that you can use at home, but I think one of the most trusted sources is a scanning machine called Vizia, which a number of clinics will have. So we have one in our clinic. You can see them in sort of anywhere from spa all the way up to more sort of derm or plastic surgeon-based practice. But the idea of Avisia is that it's really looking deeply into the different layers of the skin and giving you sort of a map of what it sees. So things like redness, pigmentation. It gives you, a skin age, which can be slightly terrifying.
That is scary. I've done that.
And that can also help to sort of guide treatments as well as skincare. I think one thing I can't forget to say as well, just because the brand that I have is Joonbyrd, which is all about body care. And I think one thing that we were talking about this earlier, and you tend to see, particularly around perimenopause, so many changes in body skin. And so it's an area that you really don't want to neglect or forget. And so thinking about using kind of targeted body skin products, whether that's moisturizers or serums, I think those can have an amazing impact on skin. We tend to focus so much on the face, and in actuality, only 4% of your skin is on your face. So it's important to think about body care too.
You've led straight into my next question. You read my mind. Where do we begin with body care? Because like you say, it's something that is so neglected. But I remember someone saying to me that you could tell your true age by your neck skin. Because we forget about it.
We do, the neck is interesting because I think people do tend to sort of forget about it, but really your neck and your hands are exposed to the elements just as much, if not more in some cases, as your face and the chest too. So I think with body care, one thing just to start with is simply moisturizing. I'll have a raise of hands of how many people regularly moisturize their body.
Better than me. Yeah, that's impressive.
Because it's interesting. I can't even imagine. Like, my skin feels so tight if I don't moisturize. But you'd be surprised at how many people just don't even think about it. And moisture is so key to the skin, particularly as we say, going from season to season, you can really start to see a disruption in oil production, in skin barrier. So simply just starting with moisture is a great place to begin your body care journey. And then you can really think about using some of the same ingredients that you use on your face, on the skin below the chin. So whether that's targeting rough skin, like strawberry skin on the backs of the arms, which is called keratosis pilaris, or thinking about treatments that can help tackle crepey skin. We were talking earlier about crepey skin on the belly. So we have in-clinic treatments that can help, and also at-home skincare.
I'd love to speak a little bit more about Joonbyrd, not as a shameless plug, but also because you've done something really interesting with this, because you're mixing science-backed skincare, which is what you've always done in clinic, with psychology. And I think that's really fun because we often forget about the benefits to our mind when we're actually taking care of our body. I would love to take more time to moisturise because it's an act of self-care. Can you tell us a little bit about the brand and why you launched it?
Yeah, so basically the idea of Joonbyrd is exactly that, to sort of marry the two things that I love most about skincare. So one is thinking about the biology of the skin, and that obviously goes back to my clinical practice. But the other is that my grandmother was actually an incredible sort of proponent of self-care before we even had a term for self-care, and she had all these gorgeous lotions and potions in her bathroom that I would play with as a young girl. And so to me, skincare has always also been about that sort of joy and that connection and that ritual. And I felt like so the name Joonbyrd is actually a nod to her, so she was Persian, and Joon is a term of endearment in Farsi. But I also felt, in terms of body care, I was sort of seeing more patients come in with body skin concerns, and traditionally you sort of have two different types of body care. One is, it just sort of feels nice and smells nice, but maybe there aren't a lot of active ingredients in the product. And the other is you can get sort of very medicinal skincare that's very much targeted at, for example, reducing rough skin. And so I really felt like, why can't you have both to have that sort of the meaningful results with the ingredient profiles that you would normally associate with facial skincare, but also to really create that ritual and that connection. And so where we drew the neuroscience and the psychology in is thinking about how do we create fragrances that can actually boost your mood when you use them, use textures that allow you to connect with yourself. And so, that was the genesis. We launched just over a year ago. And I think that body care is a great way, again, to really have that sort of moment. It can be super quick. You jump out of the shower in the morning and you put something on for 30 seconds and you just have that quick hit of sort of happiness and hydration and that moment to connect. Or you can really invest in, let's say, a longer sort of ritual with, a bath and a gua sha and your salts, and do that in the evening. And to me, there's nothing better.
I love that idea of a ritual. I think we are trying to reconnect with our bodies. There's sometimes this idea of not giving our bodies enough love and speaking to our bodies quite negatively. So actually taking the time to care for your body, I think, is quite powerful in itself. And the bottles are beautiful, just looking at them, they're so colourful. And I'd love to finally touch on hair care, because I think that's something you also see a lot as a dermatologist, especially during this season, shedding or hair loss. What can we be doing to prevent that or addressing that if that is a concern?
Yeah, this time of year is definitely where a lot of people will experience a bit of shedding. So you might find that your hair grows faster and a bit fuller in the summer months, the warmer months, and then we have a stage of all of our hair goes through growth stages, and there's a stage called telogen, which is sort of resting phase right before our hair will shed. And so for whatever reason, during that sort of transition from summer to fall, oftentimes more hair will go into that telogen phase. So we call it telogen effluvium. It means more hair sort of shedding. And I think one way to help is to make sure you're using products that are supporting the scalp. So whether that's a shampoo and conditioner aimed at volume or hair densifying, whether it's a scalp serum, again, to help kind of support just the skin, even the skin barrier on your scalp, all of that can really help with preventing shedding. There's a brand called Vegamore, which I really like. And then the other that I actually use it at home. My whole family likes to take pictures of me, but there's a LED caps. I don't know if you've seen. So the same way we can use LED for our face, LED for the scalp can be very helpful, again, in supporting scalp health and supporting hair growth. And so I wear my cap every night.
I love that. I have seen some of those. I need to invest in one of those. We speak so much about LED for the face, and I think that's something that we'll speak on with Sarah. It's so beautiful what you say there about actually our bodies working in seasons and aligned with the seasons as well, and I think that's something that we're all going to touch on. Thank you, Alexis. That was fascinating. There will be some time at the end for questions and answers, so if you have anything to ask Alexis, please wait for them. Thank you. Jo.
Hi.
I can't wait to speak about the gut, because everyone says the importance of the gut, but actually it's something we sometimes forget to take so much care of when we're consuming everything, especially during the summer. What are the main concerns of people in your clinic when it comes to the gut, especially during this time of seasonal change?
Oh, what a good question. So, yeah, you're right. I think unless somebody has a gut issue, like they're bloating or they're finding digestive changes, then they often don't regard themselves as having a gut issue. But what we know about the gut is it's such a centralised hub. It's connected to nearly every system in the body. So if we have skin flare-ups, if we have hormonal shifts, if we have bone issues or energy issues, we can often link it back to the gut. So it's important for everybody. And anytime you see a nutritional therapist, whatever's going on and whatever symptoms you're presenting with, often that's the first place we'd start to look at. So from shifting from summer to autumn, I just think it's just a flux time anyway. I think we see lots of things flaring from immunity. You know, there's lots of bugs going around. With the lack of vitamin D, that really does affect how our immune system responds. And 70% of our immunity is found in the gut. So if that isn't working optimally, you can see how that could have an onward effect. So I see that a shift in immunity, a shift in energy, and again, we are these amazing sensory beings. We're constantly taking on information, and I don't just mean like from Instagram. I mean literally all around us, the changes in light, the changes in diet, what's available from food. And that sends a message to the body that there is a change in season, and we do need to kind of shift and go with it and go with the flow. But if we're a little bit out of sync, if there's some places out of balance, that's when it tends to kind of come to the fore. And I'm sure in traditional Chinese medicine, you often see that change in season as a really sort of prominent time when people are finding a little bit of a struggle. And there's a shift in diet. You know, the foods that nature provides us in the summer are very rich in water, because we need them to be. We need to be hydrated. They're very rich in antioxidants that are going to support and protect our skin. And then as we shift into the autumn, you tend to have richer foods, much like with your skincare. You're looking for deeper oils, more proteins, and foods that you can cook slowly, because our digestion actually isn't all that optimal in the summer. It likes warmth. So if we're eating the same foods from the summer, if we're still having cold smoothies all the way through autumn and winter, we're not necessarily doing the best in terms of our digestion and our gut health to absorb those nutrients. So we do need to shift our patterns in diet and how we prepare food to better optimise our body.
I'd love to dive deeply into some of those patterns shortly, but how can we know what's going on in our gut? Is there any role that testing plays here? Because there could be so much going on inside and ultimately we really wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, gut testing can be amazing. It can really give us so much information. I think testing's a really interesting one, actually, because for me, it's only useful if it's going to change how you approach the plan or how you're going to approach your issue. And for many people, their symptoms alone or their patterns or their habits or their food diary can tell me so much, and that's a great place to start. I think testing is important when we need to really get to the nitty-gritty of exactly what's going on, or if it's quite confusing, there's lots of symptoms going on, we don't know where to prioritise. That's when it can come into its own. As just somebody who's interested in gut health and maybe not a practitioner, it can be a really confusing space to do a test. There's a lot of information and a lot of data, and it's only useful if you know how to use that data to make a plan. So I would definitely recommend working with a practitioner if you are going to do a gut health test, because there are many different markers that all mean different things, and bad doesn't always mean bad when it comes to gut health and bacterias. It's all about a balance and knowing where to find the balance as well.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that personalised approach again, which is what we've spoken about with skincare, and a thread that I think is running more and more through the wellness industry now. You spoke of the different foods that we can be eating or the transitions that we can be making in our diet. Can you explain those a little bit more? What ingredients should we be looking out for as the autumn arrives?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I really like to look to our ancestral patterns. That's always my first place to start. I think we're quite forward-thinking people as a species, but there's so much rich history that we can learn from, especially when we look at our ancestral patterns and norms. And so there's some really quite obvious ones when we look to the plants that are growing around us. They really do tell us the kind of nutrients that we need. So in the summer, like I said, we've got lots of water-rich vegetables and fruits. In the autumn and winter, we tend to have ones that are rich in beta-carotene. So that's why you get lots of oranges around autumn. That's a pigment that we find beta-carotene in, and that's a really important pigment for immunity. It really supports our immune system. And when we look at things like proteins and fats as well, traditionally speaking, before we had sort of factories and big farms that were pumping out the same foods all through the year, we'd have things like lighter proteins during the spring and summer, like eggs, for example. Chickens don't naturally lay eggs during the winter. That's not a thing they do. So we would have had those sort of easier to digest, lighter proteins. And then throughout the winter is when we'd really focus in on the meats, the heavier kind of cuts, and we'd be eating more nose to tail. So I just think not necessarily that we have to really reflect that in today's life, but we can really use that information to try and go a little bit lighter during the summer months, and we don't necessarily need to go to the heavier, sort of richer meats. And it is really important to go for those richer ones as well, especially organ meats can be really great. I see a huge trend going towards that way, and I think it's actually brilliant because meats like liver, which I think some people are like, oh God.
I remember my mum making liver and bacon when I was a child.
But again, it's so rich in iron, magnesium, all these really important minerals that we definitely need throughout those winter months to keep us resilient. Often women in particular are very low in iron as they come out of summer and into winter. And that can be because we are going for the lighter kind of proteins. We don't necessarily lean on those sort of iron-rich ones. It's really important to make sure that we've got good iron status going into the winter, because our immunity can really suffer without it, and our energy dips, all of those things linked to iron are really important. And I would just also look at things like dark leafy greens. It's really, nature does really present us with exactly the things we need, which is really cool. What doesn't change is kind of the basic nutrients. We all need fibre all 365 days a year. Omega-3 levels don't change. You always need that. You're always going to need a protein source, but the types change throughout the year, which is super cool, I think.
You mentioned fibre there. There's a lot of noise around fibre at the moment.
There is.
I quite like it. Is it fibre maxing that everyone's speaking about?
Yeah.
What is fibre maxing, and what role does fibre play? Because I think it can often be misunderstood.
Do you know what? I'm actually delighted, and I'm not often delighted by a nutrition trend, let me tell you. But this one in particular, I think there isn't a nutritionist who's working now who hasn't been trying to get the message across about fibre. And it's just really unsexy, honestly, which is why it hasn't probably taken up until now. But for some reason, we've all clung on to fibre. And I think it's actually a really good thing. There was a recent national dietary survey that showed that 96% of us aren't reaching our fibre goal per day. And the reason that's so important is fibre does many things, but one of its most important roles is to feed our gut bacteria. They love the stuff. So if we're not feeding our gut bacteria, we tend to then have a proliferation of bad gut bacteria. And they take up more space within our gut. That's when we get some gut dysbiosis, and eventually we can get some symptoms and issues from that. So feeding our good gut bacteria is super important. And fibre maxing is looking at least 30 grams to maybe some people are edging up to 50 grams a day. Just for context, our ancestors, again, had up to 100 grams of fibre a day, right? So our sort of processed food diets have really stripped us of how much fibre we're able to get per day. It's a great thing to focus on. Doesn't mean that other things aren't important though. So I think often what we tend to do when we see a trend is we'll really go for it. Protein's been a big one at the moment, but as everybody's so focused on protein, they're forgetting about the healthy fats, the phytonutrients, the fibres. So yes, fibre's important, but it is literally all about variety and balance.
That's really important, especially when we're speaking about food, to note this holistic approach and including almost everything into our diets. How can we be getting the fibre naturally?
I mean, it's about different types across the day. So you have fibres which are called soluble fibres and insoluble fibres. Soluble fibres are these ones that create this kind of gel-like substance in our gut. So you see a really good example is chia seeds. When you add water to chia seeds and they get all like gelatinous. PHGG in terms of supplementation is a really good soluble fibre, and that tends to be the one our gut bacteria likes the most, so it's a really good fuel. Insoluble fibre is exactly how it sounds. It travels through the gut. We can't really break it down very well, but it plays an important role in that detoxification system. We often forget that the gut is actually one of our main ways of detoxifying, of eliminating, and it's so important to keep that pathway clear, especially for our hormone health, because if our gut is blocked, if it's not able to eliminate, we actually recirculate those hormones. And the hormones that's being used and recycled isn't optimal. So we want to be keeping that pathway clear. So to be getting enough fibre across the day, it's just, again, looking at the most sort of whole food, natural sources you can. You do get them in fruits and vegetables, especially on the skin of fruits and vegetables is where you find them. But the best sources are things like nuts, beans, legumes, grains, lentils, chickpeas, all the things that you would associate probably fibre, not bran flakes. It tends not to be my first port of call. But oats, there are so many different types. And honestly, if you are looking at a whole food diet and you're trying to get a variety, you're likely to be getting enough fibre.
It's really interesting that you mentioned hormones there, and I think that's something we'll touch on at the end about our own seasonal cycles. Supplementation. You mentioned their fibre supplementation. It's a minefield, and sadly an industry that isn't regulated. As the Director of Nutrition at Ancient and Brave, you are involved in a lot of the innovation of new supplements. Can you explain the power of supplementation, when we should and shouldn't be using it?
It's such a good one. And, you know, full transparency, I'm Director of Nutrition at a supplement company, but I am also a nutritionist, and I truly believe in food-first approach. That is where most of your attention should be going, and I know that our attention is pulled in all different directions of products and all sorts, and where supplementation plays a really important role is that bridging the gap and targeting where you're needing it. So some good examples of bridging the gap are things like collagen. When we look at collagen in the diet, we can see it in nose to tail eating, so literally eating a whole animal. It's found in the gelatinous parts of animals, like the bones and the joints. Not many people are eating that. So we can face the fact that not many people are probably getting those amino acids found in those parts. things like collagen supplementation can help to bridge that gap when we're not getting it to our diet. Omega-3 is another great example. Classically, this country especially are very low in omega-3, so important for our mood health and our brain protection and our skin health and all sorts. And we're not eating enough oily fish. We don't get it in things like, well, we do. In small amounts, we get it in like whitefish, but in large amounts, we get it in sardines, salmon, mackerel, the really fishy fish that people, aren't going to eat on a train. So therefore, we tend to be low in omega-3. So I think at that point, that's where we see a really important need. And then when we look at our farming practices that we have now, they are really depleting us and our foods of essential minerals. So we don't have the same amount of magnesium in our vegetables anymore. So even with the best diet in the world, we can be really struggling to reach that goal of optimizing how many minerals we need. So again, magnesium supplementation for some people can play a really important role in that as well. And then we look at kind of more targeted supplementation. So if we're presenting with certain symptoms, or there's certain things going on in our lifestyle maybe that we might need a bit more support, that's what they're there for. They're a supportive tool to use. And much like acupuncture, much like skincare, all these tools it's about creating a toolbox that you can use that's personal for you. So I think when they're really powerful, it's understanding what you need. And that's when you can kind of take the time to pick and choose what's going to work for you. And it will change. We change all the time. The same thing that worked for me when I was 25 will not work for me now I'm 40. So I need to change and adapt and shift. And that can take some time and exploration, something that we don't always have. We're very short on time at the moment. But if we can just slow our roll a little bit, start to listen to our bodies rather than all the ads, then that can really help us understand what we need.
It's really beautiful that you mentioned listening to our bodies. Is that where targeted intervention and testing and stuff could come in helpful once again, just to know what we're low on when it comes to things like vitamins, iron? Because it's also not good to be overdosing on those things as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, iron, especially vitamin D, we can store, so it is important not to be getting too much. And nutrient testing can be really amazing. I think there's some signs that a practitioner might be able to spot. So for iron, for example, a really quick, easy test you can do at home in the mirror is if you pull down your eyelid. If it's quite white, that's quite a big sign that you're iron deficient or insufficient. And it should be red. It should be beautifully red. But yes, I think it can give us a really quick and easy picture of what's going on at that moment in time, for sure. So autumn, I would say, is a great time to test your vitamin D levels because it should be at its highest. You should have been soaking in all that beautiful sunshine. And if it's not, now's the time to catch a low vitamin D level so you can sort of support it through the winter. And again, nutrients don't all work in isolation. They all work in a synergy and a symphony. So because you have a low vitamin D level, you might be thinking, well, I have been in the sun all summer. What on earth is going on? Other vitamins and minerals do play a role. Magnesium, again, it supports your vitamin D absorption and efficiency. So if you are low in magnesium, that could be the reason that you're not quite getting the most out of your vitamin D. So it does need a little bit of connecting the dots. And again, practitioners are really great at being able to connect the dots for you because it can be really hard and confusing to look at all those different systems of the body where all the different nutrients are affecting it and try to make sense of it. So that really is their role.
That's the power of seeing a practitioner, isn't it?
Power of seeing a practitioner.
And I'd love to speak on the gut supplement that everyone will be taking away with them today. The True Biome, is that what it is from Ancient and Brave? Can you explain what's different about this supplement? Because, like I say, there are so many options. How do we know which one to choose?
Yeah, I'd love to actually, and I'm really excited for you all to try this supplement. I believe you've got a full-size version, which is very exciting. So the gut supplement world has really sort of taken off, especially in the past sort of 3 to 5 years. And for good reason, because we now know how important our gut health is. So for that, I'm delighted. And the main approach up until now has been about probiotic support. And this is not to say probiotics do not play a role in gut health. They can be really supportive for certain people. But what we know is we've got so many different strains in our gut. It can be hard to understand exactly what you need as an individual. And we also know that just throwing more strains into the gut isn't always the best approach. So we've kind of, again, circled back. We've looked back at the science. before probiotics, and we've really taken on board a lot of practices from Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, to try and understand what the approach for gut health and gut care could be. And there's an old theory called the terrain theory, and it kind of goes against what is the traditional germ theory. The traditional germ theory is germs are bad, get rid of the germs, we sanitize, we have antibiotics, they're not a good thing. But we actually now know that microbes are one of the oldest species out there. They adapt, they evolve, they survive. So actually working with them is really important. Terrain theory takes on the account that if the body, the terrain, the ecosystem is healthy, these germs don't really have an effect on them. So we need to maintain a healthy ecosystem, a healthy environment. And you can see that in nature. David Attenborough's new film about ocean, he changed the seabed, and that's what brought everything back to life, right? So we can do the same in the gut. The way that True Biome works is this triple action care. So number one, we have L-glutamine. L-glutamine is a really important amino acid that feeds the cell walls of the gut lining. So often we look at the microbiome, we think that's the most important thing, but where the microbiome lives is so important. Your house is important. We need to make it strong. We need to make sure that nothing's getting through that shouldn't get through.
Is that what we speak about leaky gut syndrome that people often
100%.
complain of?
Yeah, so leaky gut syndrome is where the tight barrier in your gut becomes a little bit leaky. It can let unwanted particles through, and that sets the immune system into alarm, and that's what can create this onward effect for symptoms from everything from skin flare-ups to autoimmune diseases. So we want to keep that gut barrier tight, and L-glutamine supports that by feeding those cell walls, so that's really important. Secondary, we've got PHGG, and this is a soluble fibre, and it's the soluble fibre that your gut bacteria loves. So we're feeding, so we are creating this repaired wall, we are feeding the gut bacteria that's already there. You've already got loads of great good guys. Let's sort of use what's there and help them grow. And then a postbiotic. And postbiotics are really interesting and definitely where the gut health space is moving into. Probiotics, which you might have heard of, are live bacterias. Postbiotic in supplement form, we've killed it. So it's not alive anymore, but it still has the benefits. It releases the beneficial substances that send the messages across the body. They're like messengers. So with this care of feeding, repairing, protecting with the postbiotics, you've got this triple action, beautiful system that's going to support the ecosystem to get that into a healthy state. And then I truly believe that you have this innate wisdom inside you. The body wants to heal all the time, and especially with gut health, because things turn over at such a rapid rate, you can see changes really quickly. So I'm excited to see how you all get on with it.
That's really interesting. You mentioned the body's regenerative approach, again, something that we spoke about with skincare, but also how do we take this? Because I think much like with skincare, it's to do with consistency, right? If we're not taking it every day, then it's not going to be so powerful.
Yeah, totally that. So with most supplementation, consistency is key. I'd say herbs are probably the only thing that you can kind of dip in and out on and be a bit more intuitive with. But things like collagen, like True Biome, you want to be doing it every day. So we've created a powder that is tasteless, odorless. You can add it to hot drinks, cold drinks. And the idea is that you can just take it every day because it's so easy. You don't have to refrigerate it. It's not going to be stuck away in your cupboard in some kind of capsule. You can just like leave it on your kitchen counter and add it to a drink every day.
Good that we can put it in coffee, because I once heard that collagen isn't stable enough to go in coffee, so then you have to take lots of different drinks. Is that right?
Yeah, no, collagen is a super stable molecule. It actually withstands degrees up to like 300 degrees, so you're not going to find it in your kitchen. You're fine.
And just finally, I'd like to touch on hormones again, because you briefly mentioned that at the beginning, and the idea that our body is also going through its own cycles. How can we be using nutrition and different ingredients to support our own cycles, not just the ones that are happening outside?
Yeah, I love that. And I really, women especially, we're extremely cyclical, dynamic beings, which are super cool. And I think for a long time we've kind of seen that as a bit of an enemy, because we live in this world which wants 24 hours on all the time. But there's so much beauty in our cyclical nature. If you look at anything in nature, it's cyclical. The lunar cycles, the seasons. And if we lean into that and really kind of see it as a superpower, then we can really start to live in alignment and feel more balanced. So whilst we have our own monthly cycles, we also have like a life cycle of a woman, and that can sort of fall into different archetypes along the way. I think, again, traditionally speaking, they fit into different seasons of a woman, which would be maiden, mother, queen, crone, which sounds really mean, but I'll come back to that one. And these don't necessarily mean an age, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a child within this time, but there are certain energies and things that we can think about during these moments in our life. So for the maiden period, this tends to be sort of adolescence to late 20s, 30s, and it's all about sort of freedom, innocence. It's a lot of energy, but there's also a need to lay down our future health. So within our 20s, we actually lay down most of our bone density, which is going to protect us in the later years, right? And this is quite scary for people who, during their 20s, will really feel that pressure to diet, to restrict. And when we're restricting ourselves of really important nutrients, we are actually depleting our bone density. So this is a time for hormonal support. It's getting in the fibers, the fats, the proteins, and trying to sort of balance that energy as much as you can. Then during our mother period, which tends to be sort of 30s to late 40s, early 50s, again, doesn't have to mean you're going to birth a child, although some people do at that time. It can mean birthing a business, birthing a hobby. It's some kind of creative force and energy. And during this time, it is about energy. You know, you're going to be pulled in a lot of different directions, so you've got to keep that energy stable. And the way we support that through nutrition is looking at things like blood sugar balance, making sure we've got optimal B vitamins, making sure that our gut health is intact so we feel resilient during that time. The queen era, which I love, is perimenopause and menopause. And this is a time of real transition and change. It's the autumn, really, in our lives. And this is where the things that we got away with in our 20s, we're not necessarily going to do in our 40s and 50s and 60s. And so we just need to pay more attention to what our bodies need at that time. And there's a lot of need for things like phytonutrients, which are going to help us balance our hormones. There's more need for protein because we start to lose our muscle mass, and we want to keep that healthy to keep us resilient as we age. And then we go into crone era. And let me just say that crone once meant crown. And it meant crown because these women were the leaders. They were the leaders of the communities. They were the healers. They were the change makers because they had all that wisdom of their life up until that point. And so whilst crone now has been taken out of context, let's say, in a very pleasant way, we should start to sort of take hold of that name again. I think it's a really powerful time for a woman. But this time, in terms of our nutrition, is all about preservation. We want to be really making sure that we are thinking about how our digestion has slowed down. So we want to be having more foods that are easier to digest, like soups and stews and curries. We want to be thinking about how to protect our skin, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but because it is our barrier to the outside world. If we keep that strong, that's really important. And protecting and preserving our brain health. So omega-3s can become really important. Things like creatine can be really important for an older woman. So trying to think of ways that we sort of preserve those elder years is really important. It's not just so we can live longer, but so we can live longer and well.
That's really empowering, hearing you speak about being excited for those seasons. We can often get scared of the change and all the changes that we're going through. And that's something that shows in the Ancient and Brave general portfolio of products. I think it's empowering us at different times of our lives. Thank you, Jo. That was really fascinating. Have some time for questions at the end for Jo. And Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. Sarah, I absolutely adore your method because it is truly a holistic approach. We are not just focusing on the way that you look when you leave your clinic, but also the way that you feel. What do your patients present with at this time of the year? Why are they seeking the Bradden Method?
This time of year, it varies really. Either you've got the you've got the ones that have been away all summer, so they're very rosé fueled. They've overdone the the drinking, the eating, enjoying the sunshine, as summer holidays should be. So there's a real mix of dehydration, pigmentation coming in, that change of season in the skin, but there's definitely a sense of change of mood as well, because there's often that the light in the day changes as we're going into the end of August. You know, either kids are going back to school, you're going back to work. It's like that Sunday night dread, except it's happening at the end of the summer. So there's a lot of feelings of different anxiety, you know, whatever the kind of the spinning plates are, whether that is school work or, you know, it can be a combination of things. But also there is a lot of people view September as like being one of even the bigger new year than what January is. So sometimes people are coming in, I want to come in, I want to have a reset, I've got so many plans, you know, I've done my summer, I've had a great time. So like there's a real mix of what people come to see me for really at this time of year. So yeah, however you come and see me is obviously how I will help and treat. So whether that's a rosé-fueled sunshine holiday, and lucky you, or whether that's, you know, you're feeling a bit more anxious about, you know, back to work, the nights are drawing in, the days are shorter. You know, there's ways that I work in the Bradden Method that really help and support you through that transition. And seasonal changes are such a big part of how we not only feel, but also how we look.
Can you explain your practice a little more? Because it really does go beyond just acupuncture, doesn't it? What are you including in these treatments as well as acupuncture?
So I like to leave no stone unturned in the 90 minutes. So the Bradden Method is 90 minutes, and it's a real combination of acupuncture. So traditional acupuncture and what you would typically know in terms of body needling, but I also love to include microsystem acupuncture, so that's working with the ears. I know we're going to talk a bit about the ears, but I have a slight obsession with the ears, the acupuncture. And also working facial acupuncture, so working on the aesthetics, the health of the skin. And it's the face is another, again, a really powerful microsystem. So even if somebody was to come to me and say, well, actually, I'm not bothered about any skin concerns, I would still always use the acupuncture on the face because it has such a profound effect on the whole system. And then I like to cocoon the body in LED. The organs love LED. I mean, we are effectively like plants, so, you know, we need to get that light. A few crystals are placed around. We do some tuning forks. There's sound therapy. That I work with infrared, the PEMF. So the mat that you lay on is amethyst encrusted, and then you've got the infrared in there, and then you're kind of cocooned in the LED. So I really put you in this cocoon of wellness. So really, it's whatever you need. There's not much that acupuncture can't help with. And also I'm an energy healer, so I will always work on your energy. So as soon as you walk in that door, I'm already reading you, and I read you from the minute I get the message from, whether it's, I don't want to freak anyone out here, but from a WhatsApp message to an email or to a text or a call, you know, I'm already tuning in and already making notes about what I feel and think that you need. And then part of the consultation, when you come in and have a chat, whether it's the first time you see me, 10th or 100th time, it doesn't matter. There is always a nice chat at the beginning of the session because I'm reading your face. So Chinese face reading is a really important part of the practice as well. So it's a real combination, and everyone's like, oh my God, you're going to do all that in 90 minutes. And I'm like, well, don't worry, you'll be snoring and dribbling for most of the time. So, you know, I mean, I do bring a lot into the method, but that they dovetail really beautifully together. And, you know, energy, chi, Reiki, energy, the light, you know, this is all about activating our own body's healing mechanisms. So there's nothing about overstimulating or just layering just for the sake of the fact that, oh no, there's oxygen as well. I forgot to mention that. Another thing. But, you know, it's not about just layering things in just because they are on trend. You know, acupuncture's been around for donkey's years, you know, thousands and thousands of years, and those guys absolutely nailed it. And there's nothing, you know, they've continued to pioneer in the wellness world. So everything that I handpick in that therapy is one, because of what I needed through my own recovery, but two, it's because they work so well together.
Can we speak a little bit about auricular acupuncture, which is the
Yeah.
ears that you say you've got the obsession with?
Yeah.
Why do you choose the ears? What power is there in putting needles into the ears?
For me, well, first, it's probably one of the most studied microsystems. And just like people would recognise often the map of the body on the foot, so like with reflexology, you often see these pictures of the feet in clinics when you go in. The ear is the same. So for me, working with the ear is like having a direct line to the brain. So I always feel that we can really calm somebody quite quickly when we first use a few of the acupuncture points in the ears. And there's over 220 points in the ear, all correlating to something or somewhere in the body. So very often when you needle the ear, you may feel some heaviness, you may feel some warmth, but I mean, that's all completely normal. You're just firing up that chi in the body. And if you rub your ears, it's such a forgotten part of the body. I mean, it's just heavenly. You know, I see people when I start rubbing their ears, you know, their eyes are rolling in the back of their head. You know, it's a really powerful microsystem. It's a great one for doing a little facelift, which I can talk about if anybody wants or details on. So for me, the ear is a really incredible, powerful, forgotten part of the body. So, yeah. And I use the ear seeds as well.
I was going to speak about the ear seeds. What's the power in using those? Because we can wear those outside of the clinic as well, so it prolongs the effects.
So back in the day, the ear seeds were literally that. They were like a vicarious seed with like a piece of tape put over the ear. So aesthetically, they didn't look that great. So, but now we have beautiful crystals that we can use in the ear. So I tend to match the colour of the crystal with different chakras or what the client needs. And we place them on the acupressure points. So the idea being is that you just press them throughout the day. Like you kind of intuitively know once you wear them which ones you should be pressing and for how long. Initially they may feel a little bit sensitive, and don't be put off by the sensitive. And I don't mean painful. You know, if it's painful, you go back and see the practitioner. They're there to be moving chi. You know, they're there to be awakening your system. So you just press them throughout the day, and they last for about 4 to 5 days. So it really depends what the client needs. And again, there's not much ear seeds can't help with. They are amazing for insomnia, hormones, migraines, facelift. You know, I'm quite obsessed with the facelift.
Go on, tell us more about this facelift that you're mentioning. Tell us a little bit more about the facelift.
So there's certain points on the ear that you can do that will really enhance your cheek and lift the face. So we do a lot of those points. Yeah.
Asking for a
so
friend.
So your lobe is your face area. So this part here, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. This is your face and your neck. So when you rub this part, so I needle a lot when somebody's coming in for a facelift effect. You just massage this point and it will help lift the cheeks of the face.
We're going to walk out of here looking really snatched.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then if you use the ear seeds to help with that, then obviously you've got them throughout the day. But it's a great one for giving... You know, you're sending a lot of blood circulation to the face as well, so the face will naturally look much more radiant, it will look lifted. You know, it's a really quick hack, you know, before you get ready, date night, going out with the girls. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's so many things that we can do to, you know, give the face a little fix quite quickly.
And is ear seeding something that we can do ourselves from home as well? Because there's quite a lot of at-home kits and things like that, and lots of maps of the ear that we can follow. Or do you recommend doing it in a clinic with a practitioner?
Depends what you're going to use them for. I think for quite, if it's slightly a bit more of a sensitive issue, I would always go and see a practitioner, just because the placements can be a bit tricky. Most, like for example, if it's just, when I say just, you know, if it's insomnia or hormones, they're quite easy to put on. I mean, they are literally like little plasters. So the key thing is just making sure that the ear is really clean, that you've got a good light and mirror so you can actually place them where they're meant to be placed. Some people get quite nervous of doing them themselves at home, there's nothing to be nervous about, really. I mean, you know, everybody's ear anatomy is slightly different because everybody's ear is so different, but you kind of, as long as you're in that area, you're pretty good to go. But anything more sensitive, I would always go and see a practitioner for, because again, it's like acupuncture. You can be really, really, really bespoke.
Can we speak a little bit more about this idea of energy? Because you are such a beautiful healer, and also you're always so calm. Every time I'm around you, even just the way that you speak makes me feel really calm. What role does energy play in us every day and during the seasonal shifts? And how do you work in your practice to shift that energy?
So, I mean, acupuncture is all about chi, is all about energy. But being an energy practitioner, I've always been able to read energies even as a small child. So I knew very early on the power of energy. And so once I trained in acupuncture, I realised that when I was doing Reiki or the energy healing with my gorgeous clients, is that what I was doing is I was working with the needles at the same time, which all of a sudden it lit up the body like a circuit board, which probably makes me sound a bit nuts, and I apologise for that, but it's actually so powerful to work with my energy, moving the energy through with the acupuncture needles and helping clearing any blocks. You know, the idea being, particularly of how we view it in TCM, is that, you know, your chi should be like a beautiful, smooth flowing river. And obviously we get a bit of debris in there going on, you know, there's things, life, kids, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. And we're not meant to hold on to our emotions. We don't have saddlebags of, oh, you know, ex-boyfriend here, the kids annoyed me this morning and I haven't done this, you know, and we carry all of this stuff. And this creates a lot of debris and blocks in our body that then obviously cause a lot of disruption to our chi. And when we have disrupted chi, this is when we can, you know, our body becomes out of alignment. So whether that's gut issues, headaches, whatever, you know, it has that big domino effect on us and how we feel. So it's really important that when we're working with the energy, with the acupuncture, but also with the Reiki, the energy healing, is that we're really clearing. So we're clearing out the river, and we want to do that in a beautiful, gentle way, because actually the body doesn't need an aggressive treatment for it to respond really well. It just needs, you know, like a little nudge. No, come on, no, yeah, you don't need to go there anymore. So, and when you treat the body gently, it responds much better. Because what I find sometimes with a lot of clients is that they'll say, oh, don't worry about the needles, just put them all in. You know, as many as you like, just put them all in. And I'm like, no, actually, you have to understand that your body won't recognise if this is a good change or a bad change. It's just going to put the brakes on and be like, well, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going to do anything now. So it's really important. Again, we are all individuals, as you know, we've spoken about today. So this is about the treatment being about really about you, what you need and what's going on with you. So it's...
Can you speak a little about the other instruments that you use to align that energy? Is it the tuning forks? Because I never really know that you're with them, but I hear this noise. What role are those playing in your method?
So tuning forks, I have this whole beautiful kit of tuning forks that are that they are attuned with the earth frequencies, and also the forks that I work with are also aligned with the astrology. So tuning forks, the body responds so well with vibration and sound. So I use the tuning forks as part of that healing therapy. So when the client's laying on the bed, needles are in, the lights are on, I go around working on different areas of the body using the tuning forks to help, you know, clear, unblock. And different organs respond well to different vibrational frequencies and emotions. And you can also use them on acupuncture points as well to help. So you're using the tuning forks instead of an acupuncture needle, which is amazing if somebody's slightly nervous of needles, or, you know, there's a lot of sweating in a session because, you know, they're a little bit apprehensive. Nobody's run out on me screaming or anything, just so it's not a torture session, but, you know, there are definitely some phobias about needles, and that's why a gentle practice is really important as well.
And can we speak a little bit about the nervous system? Is it often that you see people with an extremely heightened nervous system? Because I would say that your method is an actual reset. You leave there feeling completely different. You feel lighter and brighter, even if you don't intentionally mean to. What impact are you having on the nervous system, and why is that so important for the way that we look and feel?
I think it's we all need decompressing. I think we do too much. We're not actually designed to live this crazy life on planet Earth the way that we do. And so for me, when a client comes in, the first thing I tend to do is try and decompress them in terms of the nervous system, and that's why the ear points for me are quite key here. You can almost see the exhaling and the body relaxing, melting into the bed. And once the body's in that state, it heals. The repair's going on. You're more chilled out. They don't feel the needles so much. When they're lying like that, it's like everything's a bit more sensitive. And so you just work a little bit more until they're super relaxed, because your skin responds better to the products that you're putting in, to the massage, the blood flow, all of the chi, the bloods and the fluids all respond much better when we are at that calm state. So the nervous system, regardless of whatever you first of all come and see me for, taking everything into consideration, the first thing on the bed is about the decompression, so working on that nervous system. I mean, it's kind of key. When we feel like that, the body heals in a completely different way.
And Sarah, what can we do from home to have a similar effect? Is there anything that we can do during the seasonal shifts to feel a little bit lighter and a little bit more aligned?
Seasonal shifts are really important, and we are part of nature, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it when we live in this city life. But the seasonal changes are here for us to change, and I think that's to change and to adapt, and it's a really important part of our lives and what we should be doing. Definitely this time of year, going into the winter, so this is a yin energy, so this is about slowing down, like a bit more hibernation, early, the shorter days, gets darker much earlier. So we need to think about clearing out the house. So it's really important now that we get rid of the summer stuff. I know we're all still clutching onto the flip-flops somewhere. But it is really important, because it's important that we clear to embrace, so we can have that transformation in autumn. And particularly at the moment, because we have the big eclipse season going on as well. So the transformation, you can't transform in old stagnant energy. So have a clear out in the house. It doesn't mean that you go back and start throwing everything out of your wardrobe, but what no longer serves you, that includes makeup, creams. I mean, how many old supplements have you got sat in your cupboard that's just collected dust? And, we're all guilty of that. I know certainly I am. So it's about really clearing that pathway now and embracing the new, because we need to bring in that new energy. And also, autumn is about lungs and the large intestine. So the new Ancient and Brave product couldn't have come out at a better time, quite frankly. We need to be looking after our large intestine. You may notice as well that if you don't look after your large intestine, you will find that you'll get more bloating and things like that. It's also part of the lungs, so this is a really good time to do a lot of breath work that will help really support your body during the autumn months. The lungs are also linked to the skin, because our skin changes in all seasons, but particularly autumn. So thinking about your skincare, what you eat seasonally, like soups, stews. Try not to go too heavy on the carbs, because it does slow down the digestion. And I mean, have good carbs, but we tend to be a bit more carby. Everything's with a bit of bread, big bowl of soup, like a loaf of bread to go with it. Change it and have sourdough and things like that. But skincare, definitely. Food, the way that your house looks and feels, so you bring the autumn into your home. So colours, textures, a blanket throw over your bed. I mean, you don't have to start going crazy. It's just those few changes. But I would say one of the biggest things to do right now is to clear out, because we've got the eclipse and that full moon coming at the weekend. clear out to let the transformation happen going into the new season.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's such a beautiful note to end on. I think drawing everything that you've all said together, it's this idea of feeling empowered for the change and actually not fearing it, because it can be scary that summer is over, like you said, but we should be really excited for the change that's ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you here with us. We do have some time for questions and answers. If anyone does need to run, before that, please don't forget your goodie bag just at the back there. And we hope to see you at more of our events. We hope to be back here, but we also host several events around London, not just here at Soho House with the Beauty Triangle, which you can see on our website. And we very excitingly have just launched our festival, which will be happening in January at the Health Club. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over some questions and answers. I think there's a roaming mic just there. Does anyone have a question to start?
Hi, question for Alexis. What's your take on exosome treatments?
Very good question. So for those who maybe don't know, exosomes are, I almost think of them in a way like peptides on steroids, but essentially exosomes are something that we produce naturally, and they're messengers that kind of go between cells and can transport compounds and chemicals between cells, so telling cells what to do. They, I think, are fabulous. So we've had really good results with exosome treatments in clinic. We use them. They're a great, so there's more and more skincare coming out with exosomes, so you can use them topically at home. And the way that we use them in clinic is we will often use something to help penetrate the skin more effectively. So whether that's the facial skin, for example, or the scalp. So we might use them in combination with microneedling, mesotherapy, post-laser, where we have sort of open channels in the skin, and the exosomes can reach the lower parts of the skin more easily. But they can be great. So there are really good ways to help with inflammation in the skin, to help support the skin barrier, for example, as we transition seasons. But I expect there will be a lot more in the realm of exosomes. And actually, Joonbyrd is coming out with products that contain exosomes, so I'm a big fan.
Any other questions? I'm down the front here.
Hi, I have a question for Sarah. I'm very interested in the 5-element system in Chinese medicine, and I always feel in the summer it's so easy to be joyful because there's so much fire energy. And as I come into autumn, I always feel a bit sad because it's the end of the summer, and I've been thinking about ways to boost my fire energy in different ways. And I wondered if you had any suggestions of things that you can do to kind of keep that energy going if you have a watery energy.
That's a really good question, but you know, the change of season is because your energy needs to change. So actually, we need to be more yin. So actually, this is not about fire. This is about you transitioning into that. So it's about nurturing the more of the yin side of you. It would be really interesting, actually, to have a look at your tongue. You don't have to do that now. You don't have to do that now, but I mean, I'm really happy to... I'm really happy to have a look privately because, you know, for me, that's always a big help for me when I want to help really support somebody when they're doing their seasonal transition as well. So for me, it's never about just one thing, but it's definitely... We're less fire going into the autumn, and so it's about, you know, the yin, it's the slowing down. We don't need the fire, it's not the yang, you know, the yang is all out and the high energy. That's absolutely what summer's all about, but autumn isn't. So it's about transitioning into that slowly, and I'm really happy to have a chat privately as well to help, because if I can kind of also see what's going on in your body, and for those who are looking and thinking, well, what does she want to look at my tongue for? But the tongue tells me so much about what's going on in the body. So the way that we see that is about texture, the way that it moves, there's grooves, there's dampness, there's coating. So that will really help me also kind of understand a bit about you and what's going on and how I can give you a few suggestions.
We're going to have a queue of people waiting to have their tongues read at the end. Any other questions? Oh, one more there.
Hi, this is for Sarah. Sorry. I'm a bit confused now, so I'd like some... Because what happens to me in the summer is I relax and switch my work brain off because I've got the children at home. And actually now, autumn, September is where I switch my work brain on and I'm ready for action again. So what advice would you give there? Because I felt very chilled in the summer and I'm ready to go. So I'm going in the opposite of what my energy should be, right?
No, you're not.
Oh, okay.
No, you're not. But you know, yang is about what. That doesn't mean. So the yang is summer. So this is about being with your family and out enjoying the sunshine and a different way of life. The yin, you know, it's like a new year. So this is why we declutter. This is preparing. So this is why school term. New business ideas. So this is a rebirthing as well. So no, it's not, it's a different energy for different seasons. So it's not that you're topsy-turvy in the way that your energy is moving. It's just the summer is about family. It's the sun. It's upward energy, whereas your yin energy is about harvesting. So preparing, building.
Yeah, maybe I need to reframe that in my mind.
Yeah. No, you're on track. It's good. You're on track.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's the end of the questions, but if anyone does have any questions for our speakers, I'm sure they're here for a little while longer. So just a big thank you to you all from me, and also a really big thank you to our beauty triangle.
Thank you.
Thank you. And don't forget those goodie bags. Thank you, everyone.